Hi, I'm Pat Kiernan. Thanks for joining us for Pat's Papers, a look at what's in the nation's newspapers, a summary of some of the most relevant, the most interesting stories. Let's begin here in New York. It's a big plan to make cars greener. The Obama administration plans to clear the way for states to be as tough as they want to be on car and truck emissions. The story's on the front page of the New York Times. The leader of this movement is California, but 13 other states have followed. They have run into trouble at the federal level without the support of the Bush administration. Among the states following, Washington State, the Seattle Times runs the New York Times story on its page one as well. The states believe that federal limits on emissions aren't tough enough. The automakers had some success under President Bush in arguing they should only be subject to a single set of federal rules rather than having to customize their cars for certain states. The San Francisco Chronicle in this story highlighting the environmental clampdown, saying the 13 states that have already signed on to the California emission standards represent about half of the U.S. population. Another dozen states reportedly thinking about signing on. So at some point, you got to think it might make sense for the manufacturers just to ship the California cars to everybody. Another prominent story in the Chronicle today, a look at the economic trouble facing the Rio Vista, California area. The photo shows a housing development completely empty. Developers abandoned this project. There are 13 unfinished model homes, and that's it. The neighborhood was supposed to accommodate almost 900 families. Flight 1549 back in the news. The New York Daily News has a video on its website of the aspiring Aussie pop singer Emma Sofina. She wrote a song shortly after surviving the plane's touchdown in the Hudson River. Two Grammy-winning producers helped her to cut the record. The song is called Send Another Prayer. Also in the Daily News, Governor Rod Blagojevich and his Please Feel Sorry For Me tour of New York. Writer Helen Kennedy calls him the entertainingly nutty governor. The Illinois Senate impeachment trial begins today, but he will be nowhere near home. Instead, he's chatting with the ladies on The View and doing interviews with many of the other national news shows. Coverage of the Screen Actors Guild Awards in the LA Times. Slumdog Millionaire took home the equivalent of the Best Picture award for its ensemble cast. Members of that cast are so new to the spotlight that nobody even belongs to the Actors Union yet. Of course, the story points out it has been a struggle for SAG this year with the 7-month-old effort to win a new contract with television and movie producers. The Philadelphia Orchestra is featured on the front page of its hometown paper, The Inquirer. The financially cash-strapped group plans to visit Europe this year despite its budget problem. The story says the orchestra has recently faced criticism from its outgoing conductor and has faced a loss of prestige after not making a classical music magazine's list of the top 25 orchestras. In the Wall Street Journal, for all that taxpayer money the government put out there, lending fell at big banks in recent months. The point of the bailout was to make sure that loans were available, or at least one of the points of the bailout. But overall, the big banks put a whole lot of money into their own financial health and ended up shrinking their loan portfolios by an average of 1.4% last quarter. The Washington Post reports congressional leaders are considering giving the Federal Reserve full regulatory power over the overall financial system. That move worries some policymakers and academics who say an enhanced regulatory role could lead to more political pressure on the central bank and would lessen its independent role in monetary policy. The New York Times tries to emphasize the importance of getting things right in the financial markets. With its lead editorial today, it's about retirement and the reliance of Americans on 401k investments that have fallen drastically in the past few months. The editorial says there needs to be a better way to reasonably ensure that a lifetime of savings can't be undone by forces beyond one's control. One other item from Washington, the Post says the longest-running Senate campaign may be headed to a conclusion this week. 3 months after the election, Minnesota is still without a decisive winner in the Senate race. Democrat Al Franken is ahead of the incumbent Republican Norm Coleman, but the most notable of Coleman's legal challenges will be heard this week. The most recent official tally has Franken with a 225-vote lead. A couple of sports notes. Jeremy Abbott won the national title Sunday afternoon at the U.S. Figure Skating Championships in Cleveland. The Plain Dealer says local favorite Parker Pennington was a disappointment after injuring his ankle during warm-ups. And the Hockey All-Stars certainly weren't the goalkeepers this year. At the NHL's All-Star Game, both teams scored 11 goals before the contest went to a shootout. The game was held in Montreal. Coverage here in the French-language Daily La Presse, with hometown favorite Alexei Kovalov winning the MVP award. We finish with a story of a housing bargain. Reading now from the business section of the New York Times, the story says housing prices are falling around the country, but this one sounds hard to believe. A seaside mansion in Florida, bought for more than $13 million 5 years ago, sold for just $10. The county records was Richard Fuld, the former chairman and chief executive of Lehman Brothers, and the buyer was his wife, Kathleen. The Times story goes on to say the exact motivation for selling wasn't immediately clear, but it's possible they are trying to shield the property from investor lawsuits after the sudden collapse of the Wall Street firm. And those are just some of the headlines this morning. Thanks for joining us for Pat's Papers. Go to patspapers.com, scroll down on the main page, and you will see links to the individual newspapers where these stories were published. You can read them for yourself there and read more from any one of those newspapers.